Very good morning to you wherever you're watching us from. This is Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show we shall be exploring the very latest with the spread of COVID-19 both locally and internationally, as well as taking a look at what's making headlines across board and what has been prioritized by the local press. And of course, I'm not alone. I'm with Michael G. Gitonga. Michael, good morning.
Very good morning.
What does the G stand for?
Sorry?
What does the G stand for?
Well, the G depends on the day. G can be good, can be great, can be gigantic. It just depends on the day. But anyway, it's actually Michael Gadhigi Gitonga. Trix, good to see you.
Good to see
they
you
say purple is a royal color. So shall I say that you're looking very royal this morning?
There was a memo that went around and we had no choice but to comply.
That's it. So welcome to the show. This is Morning Express and glad to have you on board. It is now 2 minutes after 7. And as usual, we have loads lined up for you. I don't know where you're watching us from, but in Nairobi, it looks like it's going to be a very bright day. We do know that we're coming from a time where we've had lots of rains, but today looks like it's going to be a sunny day. But that aside, we also are going to be looking at what's making headlines on the dailies this morning, starting with the papers. But before that, we do know that one of the announcements on the daily updates that we've been given by the Minister for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe, is that restaurants, eateries are now going to be opened, although with strict rules. So we'd like to find out from you, do you think it is now safe to reopen restaurants? Do you think it is now safe to reopen restaurants? What are your thoughts? Do let us know. And Trix, what are the handles?
Yeah, I'm at Trix Ingado. He's at Michael G. Gitonga, and the official hashtag is KTN Morning Express. And that's going to be a very interesting topic of discussion, given the intricacies of public health and the spread of COVID-19 that is quite fast compared to any other form of flu or rather any other virus. And the interesting bit of that would be why the restaurants and not any other business forms that would be less sensitive as far as public health could be concerned. And Michael Agwanda, an analyst here and who holds a PhD in public health, will be joining us this morning to discuss that comprehensively. But more importantly, do you think this is a good thing? Do you think it is now safe to reopen restaurants? Tell us what you think, and we will be making you a part of the conversation this morning.
All right, and let's start off with looking at the dailies this morning, and we start off with the Standard, where the headline is Raila Coalition Dilemma. Now, many of us, of course, will remember that before COVID hit, there was what was popularly known as reggae, and it looks like reggae had been stopped or has been stopped by, you know, the COVID-19. But that, of course, brings in the intrigues that may be happening behind the scenes, and this particular article is highlighting the options that Raila Amolo Odinga may have on the table in regards to 2022.
Absolutely. And the title this morning is Raila's Coalition Dilemma. And just to read an excerpt from that, the ODM leader is at a crossroads apparently. The BBI train has lost its mojo, obviously owing, as Michael said, owing to the spread of COVID-19 and our attention spans shifting to something else. Sticking with Uhuru brings the advantage of incumbency at the next election. There's no guarantee that Mount Kenya voters will bend to the president's wishes. Now, on the other side, William Ruto may walk out of Jubilee with troops and build a protest alliance with Kalonzo and Mudavadi to scuttle Raila's State House dreams, just like Raila did when Kanu and Uhuru in 2002. So it seems like politics is slowly, but that reggae, it seems to be, you know, seeping in back into our headlines slowly, because the same, or rather related headline is on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning, where we're told Uhuru will betray you. This is according to Duale, telling Raila over his ongoing alliance with the president.
Yes, and again, that is according to that article in the Nation. Eden Duale, who is the majority leader in the National Assembly, basically saying that there could be a coalition coming up between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the deputy president.
Yes.
Not a coalition, but apparently they would be giving, Raila Amolo Odinga a blind side, but that remains to be seen. Of course, we have seen and heard that a day in politics is a long, long time. So all these could just be wishes. There could be things being thrown out there for them to get a reiteration or retaliation. And we do know that there was also an article that was alluding to the fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta, Jubilee, as Jubilee leader Gideon Moi and for KANU were basically coming up with a coalition with Raila Amolo Odinga. So we remain to see what happens and how this pans out.
Absolutely. And, you know, like you said, a day in politics could wind up making so many changes, particularly in a country such as this that is basically fueled by, you know, politics. But then let's move on to another area where that is education. We are told right now that on page 7 of the Standard this morning that why you will pay tuition fees even with schools closed. Now, some managers insist that they have to pay their bills. They have teachers whose salaries need to be paid, you know, utility bills, service, bank loans, and ministry is not opposed to said charges. And what do you make of this, Michael?
Well, there is a dilemma right there because, of course, many parents would expect that now that schools are closed and students are not in school, they would be expected not to pay fees. But the schools are coming out to say that, look, we still have to run the schools, and they also have come up with online material, which they are supplying and ensuring that the children still continue their education. They're still preparing for exams. Remember, the Minister for Education recently made it clear that as we stand, the examinations towards the end of the year have not been postponed and will not be postponed unless there's a change of things. So, of course, there's that banter between parents and the schools. But the schools coming out to say that we still need to have the schools, even at the point where, you know, we return to normalcy, where they'll come back. But parents saying, if our children are at home, then why are we paying fees? Maybe they should come up with a halfway house where you have them paying reduced amounts, but all the same still maintaining the school. So, of course, that's a banter that continues.
Absolutely. And the work, I believe, on the side of the teachers, it might, if they're not doing anything right now, it might be postponed to later. I don't think they would be asked, if there's an extension to their school calendar, they'll be asked to pay more. Now, they might have more work later on, but still, they still are a calendar to be followed. And then there's, depending on the infrastructure, there are teachers who are trying their best to keep up with the education and the progress of the education calendar right now with whatever means they have, be it WhatsApp group, emailing, Zoom, and maybe in remote areas there are other means that they are doing this. So at some level, teachers in many capacities are still doing something at depending on
I think they're still doing a lot in terms of coming up with the material and preparing the children. The only question, of course, that remains again is what about those in rural areas where they cannot, you know, have Zoom, they do not have internet connection, they don't have gadgets or phones where they can actually participate. The question is, what creativity are they using to ensure that the students are ready for the exams? But of course, there's always been the debate of how fair examinations at the end of the year are, given that the facilities for the children are not the same. Even when we are at a normal, you know, pace, the facilities for those, for instance, in private schools or in government schools, which are probably well facilitated compared to those who do not even have classrooms.
So, I mean, this also brings to the fore some of those cracks in public service delivery that we need to get on. And as far as tech is concerned, whether it's businesses, whether it's schools, we need to rethink how we're doing everything. And I think government should now consider what they are prioritizing right now, because on a very flat level, forget COVID, forget any other these problems, we do need these things to be in place so that schools can run better. And obviously, in the event of a calamity, or rather a situation such as this, we just keep on going as usual. Yeah.
All right. And just to back up a little bit, Trix, there's a story on page 3, and this is in following up to the announcement made yesterday by the Minister for Health, or the Ministry of Health, let me say. And this is in regards to eateries and restaurants opening. This, of course, is as a result, or rather is the basis for our question this morning. We want to find out whether people feel, or do you think that it is now safe to reopen restaurants? And this was announced yesterday. However, of course, with very stringent rules, and they can only be open from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. Staff whose COVID-19 tests have returned positive, or rather negative, are the only ones who are allowed to come back to work. And also, every eatery must record the number of people who come into the eatery and sit. There's also restrictions as to the sitting space. But again, this might be a ray of hope, meaning that maybe we are returning to normalcy.
Yeah, my question would be, why would this be the first area with which we would choose to return to normal with, because it's quite sensitive. I mean, food, and you know, in fact, some of these eateries, when you're talking about the city center, they're so tiny. So if you're trying to maintain that social distance, and the cabinet secretary yesterday was very emphatic on the fact that it's not just staying a meter away at the front, even at the back, and you know, and sideways. So you tell me, how profitable would it be, and why restaurants? There's so many other businesses in the city that could be, I think, a little safer and easier to manage when it comes to ensuring safety. And
maybe.
You see, when I test negative today, I might test positive in 14 days. So could I be infecting every other customer that I'm cooking for or serving while, you know, going about business?
I guess maybe, I don't know what rationale was used, but I would imagine it's probably an industry that employs very many people who are there on a day-to-day basis and their wages. So maybe trying to get the economy kind of back onto its feet somehow, that might be the areas to open. But again, of course, the question that, again, many Kenyans would have, and many who would be concerned, is the enforcement. How are they going to ensure that these eateries maintain these strict standards that have been put across by the Ministry of Health, particularly those in high-density areas?
Absolutely.
So, of course, that again puts a lot of work on government and the Ministry of Health to ensure and enforce that these regulations are followed to the letter.
Absolutely. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall when this decision was made, but then I think only time will tell how it pans out and whether it's a success and it results in good things. And this is a story that is on both the front page of the Standard and the Daily Nation. So if you want to know more about what that's about, you can take a look at those papers and, you know, get yourself informed or updated. If you're part of that industry, I think this is good news as long as you follow those rules that have been put in place by the ministry. And today also we told on the front page of the Daily Nation, virus fight in crisis over strike threat, as Kenyans are lining up to clap for frontline medical staff. Lack of protective gear risk allowance drives them to a point of work boycott. And you know, this is a very sensitive thing because they are at the same time just human beings like the people they're taking care of. And you know, they have to protect themselves and protect the people they're protecting, at the same time protect the people they're going home to from getting this. So a lack of protective gear, that is a basic that I'm sure nobody would want to work without in times of COVID-19.
Absolutely. And we do know that health workers, particularly doctors and nurses, we've been told that it's a calling, but this might be pushing the calling too far.
Not a calling to death, is it?
It might be pushing the calling too far in terms of not giving them the right gear that is required. We already know that it's a sacrifice that they're paying, in many ways, putting themselves at risk just by exposing themselves. So the minimum, irreducible minimums, if I can use that term, that we'd expect is for them to at least have the equipment that is required. And also, there was the question of insurance, that they need extra insurance because they are more vulnerable and are likely to get infected or sick by virtue of the fact or nature of what they do. So the three main areas that they're looking for, or four areas, is welfare, protection, insurance, and also recognition. So maybe on recognition, there is that's happening in regards to every Wednesday, you know, I think is it at 12 o'clock where we clap for them, but it should go a little bit more than clapping for them. But they want the president himself to, you know, give that recognition. Right. Yeah. And there's also a story and an article on the Standard, which I think would be of concern to many Kenyans. Trix, I don't know how private your calls are. And when you make that call, I don't know whether you imagine or think that you're just talking to that one person who's on the other side.
Well, I mean, I was reading some of the reactions that came out surrounding this story, and some people felt like the government yet again is trying to reach into our bedrooms. The government is trying to interfere, and some were quite ambivalent and saying they've been doing it. They're just trying to find a way of doing it officially. But as far as I am concerned, I think this is a breach of, you know, privacy, and it should not be happening. We're told this morning that did judges allow state to spy on your calls? So that is the conversation that is being pushed forward by the Standard this morning. The judiciary insists that the appeal court didn't sanction snooping, but some lawyers argue the devil is in the details, and you should be afraid, and why Safaricom raised the red flag over call snooping system. Now, the details are coming out right there on page 4 and 5 this morning, just giving you an in-depth analysis over why you need to be concerned about this. And I mean, pictured here is former Safaricom CEO Bob Collymore. I don't know why, but then he has been quoted right there, and some of the details that are coming out might actually give you an insight into why you need to be more concerned about this privacy issue.
Absolutely, and well, I don't know how private anything is anymore with the internet, with CCTVs all over the place, but the little that may be left, which is our phone calls and privacy to your call, seems to be under attack by the state. But also there was an article on Sunday which has been quoted here on page 5, and according to this it says there is no order or ruling allowing the state to tap private calls. So that's important for you to know, that there is no order ruling yet. There's no order. It's still in court, and there's no ruling yet for them to tap your private calls. But should they get their way, that could be something that would change. So, of course, that would be a matter of concern. And I think many of us need to read that particular article and be up to speed so that you know what is private and what is not. So it looks like we may have to return to our traditional ways of communication, which is literally one-on-one. But then again, with COVID, it looks like that is also under attack because there's social distancing. But there you go.
Yeah, exactly. But Michael, before you shift gears, I mean, how would there ever be a justification for this sort of thing, in your view?
For them, well, the argument is to do with terror attacks and the fact that sometimes terrorists use those lines of communication to disable and to get information and to spy. Also, there's a question of criminal elements in regards to, corruption and all that. There's a lot of data that is contained in these small little gadgets. Actually, they're no longer just phones, but they're communication gadgets. So they have a lot of info, and that's what the government would be looking at. Trying to get into that way. They're able to get intelligence and also to get money trails and stuff like that. But to what extent? At what point do they stop, and how do they get that
where's the line?
authority?
That's the big question, because even if you justify it with criminal elements, with certain things, once you start, it's very difficult to know where to stop and how,
Ideally, there would be a system, and the system would involve the court, such that they could be granted permission to do so, but in special circumstances which they would have to go to court and verify. For instance, even if they're to arrest or come to a house to arrest somebody, there's normally supposed to be a warrant of arrest, which is a process that is followed. So one would expect this to be done. But do we trust government to do that? I leave that to the audience right there to answer for yourself.
Right.
Can we move on to page 6 now? And there's a story there, Jubilee laptops project that failed the Kenyan child. This, of course, is what Jubilee came into power with when they came in the first time, and it was a promise to digitize the education sector with giving laptops to young ones. This, of course, would have been such a great win right now if it had actually happened. But we all know that it didn't happen. But this particular article gives reasons as to how it flopped. And there was court cases that came in. There was issues to do with procurement processes that may not have been followed properly. And that, as a result, it became a flop. But at the end of the day, it's still upon government to ensure that they keep their promise. But they did not.
Yes, and one of the sentiments that will emerge after reading this article is that, can you imagine how much easier it would be for teachers and parents and students to keep up with their education from home had the government actually, delivered on this particular promise? It would have been quite easy. It would have been, a piece of cake to ensure that they can access information, keep up with the, activities, and if there is internet access, actually keep constantly communicating, or a consistent line of communication between students and parents and the teachers. But unfortunately, that is not something that we can, brag about as a nation right now. And there's some numbers that have been put there. 1.1 million. A report tabled in Parliament indicated that 1.1 million learning devices had been distributed in schools. I wonder, if you're watching at home, did you receive any of these 1.1 million devices? Because it's not working right now, it would have been the solution to this problem that a lot of educationists are facing right now.
Absolutely. And to the nation, we've already looked at the headline, but there's also an interesting picture there. I don't know if you're able to show the picture on the Daily Nation on the front page.
The bridge.
And it is hanging on a cliff. This, of course, is in reference to the rains that have been pounding the country. And there's one particular rail track that literally has been left bare under. It's literally just a rail track with no ground under. And that just shows you the amount of havoc that this rain has been causing so far, but on also question being raised as to how prepared we ever are when it comes to dealing with rains or drought for that matter.
Yeah, preparation has always been a huge problem in the country as far as such disasters. Forget the fact that some of them happen every year. You can actually set your clock to them. And another issue is that even after these disasters happen, the reaction that we have is usually more twisted towards PR and having a photo op opportunity rather than having people actually helped. And of course, we have heard complaints that our leaders do go to these areas in the name of, showing solidarity with these people, but then they leave and then the people still have to deal with the after effects of certain, when the rains wreak havoc, particularly April every year. So this is just one, this is not a bridge, this is basically a ladder put across a muddy, two muddy cliffs that would ultimately go down if it did pour heavily.
Yeah, so we hope that the authorities will ensure that that is taken care of, because the ripple effect, of course, would be quite devastating. Another story that we know we've been seeing is that of the late Ken Walibora, very unfortunate death. And of course, there has been blame on Kenyatta National Hospital as to the fact that he lay there with no help whatsoever. Maybe there was a chance of having him saved, but there is an elaborate article in the Nation this morning on page 11. Kenyatta National Hospital, we did everything to save Walibora. And of course, this is now in their defense, saying that they did all that they could to save him. But of course, details scanty as to what happened, because according to some, they say that he lay there for hours because the ICU beds were full. Even the extra ones could not accommodate him. And he had internal injuries, which of course led to his death.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. It's ghastly. This was a literally king in his own right. And the fact that this is even coming into question, it's quite unfortunate. But then, I mean, the scariest bit is that you wouldn't know who to trust because of the various horrific stories that we've had and accounts from people who have not received ideal service from our, health institutions. So you would never know whose word to take. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, we have lost a literary giant, and this is not something that anyone would have thought would have happened this soon. But on page 6 of the Standard, before we wind up, there's a story about a virus-negative man that is whose kin are confronting stigma. And yesterday I did talk about this for a minute, about, people having certain, fears when it comes to people who have actually recovered from COVID-19. And we're told of the story of Stephen Hagai Opuka, who is a 50-year-old man cleaner who contracted COVID-19 while on duty at Mangathi and was recently declared free of the virus. But obviously his family back in the village is experiencing stigma all the way back in the village, and they are not, having an easy time, even though he probably has not interacted with them.
Yes, and this sometimes is out of just lack of knowledge and information, because one of the things, of course, COVID-19 may bring a stigma, but that's not meant to be the case because, of course, by nature of the fact that we've had so much info coming out that it is spread through contact or close proximity.
Yes.
Of course, within the villages, they might be a bit worried and concerned that even if he has recovered, what if they're going to also get COVID-19? But there you go, an interesting story right there. But that brings us to the end of Newspaper Review this morning. Maybe just to quote on the Business Daily, TSE presidency among big gainers in mini budget. But that's what we have for you on the dailies this morning. For now, we're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. When we come back, we're going to be weighing in on some things. But a quick reminder of that question: do you think it is now safe to reopen restaurants, or do you think it is now safe